Grind to Growth to Greatness podcast. The best and brightest entrepreneurs, CEOs, creators, athletes. We'll talk to them all, and we'll get the good, the bad, and the ugly on how they made it. Decoding the secrets of success. And now your host, Terry Barr.
Welcome in to Grind to Growth to Greatness. We are here with Joe Baker. Now he's changed his name to Evermore. That's a great story. We're going to get into that. But Joe Baker is in Colorado. Last time we did this, we tried this one other time. Our connection was poor. And now we think we've got it figured out. But this is a great guest. I can't wait for you to meet him. Joe Baker, welcome to the show. How are you?
Hey, excited to be here. It's
awesome.
Looking at a great day.
Yeah, fantastic. So Joe has a great story. Him and his wife, Ann, have a fantastic story. They have 3 boys. They live in Colorado, and Joe is a business owner. But I originally ran into Joe when I ran across the story about his son at 8 years old. His son and he spent a couple days on El Capitan in Yosemite, climbing that mountain. And I thought, what an interesting story. And then the more I looked into it, the more the parenting aspect came. So we're gonna dive into Joe, his family, mountain climbing, his business, Superhero Sidekicks, and really get an idea of how this guy developed his family, his business, and going forward, what's up with the Evermore family. So Joe, tell me where you grew up. Tell me about mom and dad. Where did life start for you?
Yeah, so I was born in Montana, actually Bozeman, Montana. When I was young, my parents moved me to Pennsylvania. And so I'd say those are my stomping grounds where I grew up north of Philadelphia, but I always had my heart in the West. So ever since I had the opportunity, I moved out here to Colorado as soon as we got married. And we love living in Colorado. We got a beautiful backyard with a pond, and our kids climb something almost every day.
Yeah, it's amazing. Tell me, how long did you live in Pennsylvania? Because I am in Pennsylvania. I've got a lot of Pennsylvania listeners, and they'll be excited to know that you're a Philly guy, because I got a lot of Philly fans up here. How long did you live in Philadelphia or near Philadelphia?
Really, I was probably from like 5 or 6 years old to in my 20s. And then I became a little bit nomadic until I married Ann and moved to Colorado. I think I was like 29 when we moved to Colorado.
Oh, okay. So 29 years old. How'd you meet Ann? How'd you run into her? What was that story?
So I actually invited a number of people on a climbing trip to the Wind River Range of Wyoming, to the Cirque of the Towers. And she was one of the few that said yes. I invite like 100 people and like, wow, 5 or 6 come, And she was one of the ones that said yes. And me and her and 2 other guys got stranded up on this giant fin in the middle of nowhere, and spent the night just shivering and talking. And we didn't want to get hypothermia. So we just kept each other awake and kept talking to each other and like telling stories. And we even sang some songs. And it was then that I was like, wow, I think I could take this girl. This would be pretty.
She's got some skills.
Keep up with me. Yeah.
That's awesome.
And she wasn't that mad at me for goofing up the route. So
goofing up the route. Yeah. Well, it's not often we meet somebody that can hang with you especially when you're a mountain climber and outdoorsman. So that's interesting. I've researched you obviously online and seen pictures and all those things. And it just seems like you guys are peas in a pod when you go out there in the wilderness and climb mountains. You got your 3 kids. Now, introduce me to your 3 kids. You have 3 boys. Introduce me to those. Tell me what their names are, because you have some really interesting names for your boys.
So our firstborn is Samuel Adventure, and he's the kid who was born to climb, and then it was Sylvan. We got Sylvan Lightyear. When we were asking God about his name, he said his kid was going to be on a really big scale. Okay. And so a light year is 6 trillion miles. And so that's where that comes in.
So that did not come from Toy Story then?
No, not at all.
Not from Toy Story. Got you. Okay.
No, we didn't think about Toy Story at the time. And then we have got Joey Danger is our third boy. And he's a lot of fun. Definitely came with a prophetic name. He was the first kid to break a bone. And he thinks he can follow his brothers up everything that they can do, even though he's a bunch younger. And so,
that's very cool. So you got these 3 names. What exactly prompted you to give your kids names? Like, I love the names. I think they're cool. How did they come about? How did you and Ann decide, hey, let's do something a little different with the names?
Yeah, so really there's stories with each name. And to us, naming someone feels like eternal. There's something so holy and transcendent about a name, and
Mm-hmm.
it's something that you don't pick your name, you're given a name, and
Right.
we really listened in, and we felt like the Lord led us to great names.
Mm.
And we live in a world today where brands and names really lead the way, and so
Right.
it's so important that you give your kids a name that really gives them strength and life that they can carry. And so, we went through a process and, listened to the Lord and felt like we had the right name for each boy.
How about that? Well, part of your story, and I want you to tell it because I can't do it justice. But your oldest boy, Sammy, kind of made his name early in life. 8-year-old, I think, as an 8-year-old. Tell us about the story of Sammy and what you folks did to kind of bring light to your whole mountain climbing family.
Yeah. So one of the things we do, Terry, is like each year we set one really big goal for each person in our family. And the goal has three rules. One, it has to be really visual so we can put it on the wall. Two, it
Okay.
has to be so hard that we work on it a little bit every single day. And then three, you can't die. And so those are the three rules. So each year we pick a goal, and at these stages, a lot of people say, how can you pick goals for your kid? Or like, I asked Sam what he wanted to do, and he said he
Right.
wanted to play Fortnite for 3 days and eat only ice cream. And
Yeah.
so there's a point in which we're still teaching our kids how to set goals. So we do set the goals for them
Sure.
early on. But we start when the boys are 5. And so
Okay.
this summer, Joey will be doing his first big wall it's called a mountain called Pingora.
Okay.
And it's the first mountain that Ann and I climbed together. And it's in the backcountry of Wyoming. It'll take us 2 days of backpacking just to get to the bottom of it.
Oh,
And then
wow.
it's a full adventure of going up. And so,
How about that?
so each of my boys starts at 5, and then we build on those goals. They get stronger, they get better. They're
Yeah.
getting smarter. And so when Sam was 8, we set this goal of climbing El Capitan. And to do that, we actually began talking about that 2 years before. Actually, even before
Wow.
that, we were planning and thinking about it. But really, the planning started about 2 years before.
Yeah.
And we began to just get very focused on what it was going to take to get
Yeah.
or to get an 8-year-old up this. It's the largest sheer wall in North America.
So just to pause you there, I know there's been, if you go and you read comments and you read some of the news stories that you've been on and you talk to some people, I understand that there's kind of two camps. Gosh, that's crazy. You're putting your kids at risk. To that's amazing. What an amazing story. I'm kind of on the amazing side, but I can see that there would be some pushback from general public on, hey, what are you putting your kids at risk on this 3,200 foot cliff? Tell me about how you approach that as a parent, as parents, and how you kind of got over the fact that, okay, we're going to do this. We're going to try to do it safe, and we're going to have quite an adventure as a result.
Yeah, that's something we've always had to carry. It's amazing because some of the people think that we're the worst parents in the world, that we're basically actually in violation of a crime of child endangerment or some kind of child abuse. And then you have a whole nother group of people that think I'm the best dad in the world. And so you've got to figure out which of those is true. I think this is how you're supposed to raise boys, especially in the world that we're bringing them into. It's like back in the day, like the natural environment made you very strong because you had to be strong to survive. But now
Right.
it's the kid's natural environment is actually very soft. It really, if you're not intentional, your kid will be very soft. He will not be strong. He will not be courageous. He will not have these deep levels of just character without being intentional. And so we're very intentional about like drawing our kids into their fears and then coaching them through it. And that's the story of climbing El Capitan. If you take anybody and put them up on that wall for the first time, they would have a full-on panic attack. It's a part of it that's totally insane.
Well, I have to tell you, I was a big fan of the movie Free Solo, and that's where I was first introduced to that kind of big wall climbing. And Alex Honnold, I'm sure you guys know each other, but I get a panic attack by even just watching people do that. It's and I'm sure that it doesn't even do it justice when you're out there by yourselves, but I'm amazed that you can coach anyone, let alone your 8-year-old, through that experience. And for those of you who don't know, you spent 3 or 4 days on the mountain, correct?
5 days on the wall.
5 days.
And
5 days hanging from the mountain.
You're either hanging from your fingers or you're hanging from your anchors for 5
Right.
days. Your
5 days.
whole world is like upside down. I mean, you've got to figure out how to cook and carry and everything you need to do to live on a sheer wall.
So for those that don't mountain climb or climb faces and rocks and things like that, like you do, tell me about, and just because I've researched it, I understand it to a degree. Where do you stay at night? How does that work? You're obviously not just sitting in your harness at night, but tell me how that works hanging off the wall.
Yeah, so we literally carry up a kind of a tent. We call it a portaledge that
Okay.
literally is like a fabric ledge that has some structure to it, and it allows you to have like a bed on the side of a sheer wall. And we could set it up at each camp. And so once we get to the next camp, if after pulling it all up, we can set up this like tent that we basically hang on.
Are there specifically areas that you kind of say, okay, we have to get to this particular ledge because the anchors are there to hook into and to set up portaledges and those kinds of things? Or do you create those anchors yourself? Or how does that work when you're setting up camp for the night?
Well, there's two parts to that question. One part is that months in advance, we know exactly where our camps are, and we have
Okay.
already figured all of that out logistically of what that's going to take, and that could change on the wall if there's different things that happen. We could we could change our plan, but we do know approximately where the camps are. And then your second question is are there bolts in the wall? And it's a combination of bolts in the wall that other climbers put in, and then us putting in our own gear. It's not one or the other, but those bolts are extremely strong. I mean, they could hang your truck off of those bolts and be fine. Once you're clipped into the anchors, whether it's the bolts or the gear we put in,
Yeah.
you're not going anywhere.
Well, tell me a little bit about that trip from your perspective and Sam's perspective. And then if you can venture into Mom's mind a little bit, how did she deal with it? I know that she was on board with the idea. You did that together, but try to give me those three perspectives in regards to your actual trip up El Cap.
So my perspective was as good as it gets when it comes to being a dad and really being with my son, coaching him through things. I had thought that he would probably cry like at least once every day, because there's such harsh aspects of doing a wall like this. And he didn't cry once. He was tough and he impressed me. It was doing the wall I was taken to my limits too. It's a big haul to move yourself and all your stuff up that wall and coach your son. So from my perspective, it was as good as it gets and just the most amazing, I'd say it like a really good camping trip. If your listeners haven't been on a climbing wall, it's as good as it gets. And then from Sam's perspective, it was neat just seeing the level of like confidence that I saw building in him coming through it, like this kind of inner strength. And it felt like when he summited the wall, like this was now a part of his identity and that he like kind of could forever know. And that was my hope, is that one day, like, I don't care if he's a professional rock climber. I don't that's not really something I care that much about, but he can if he wants to be. But really, one day he's going to come across a huge, impossible challenge, and he's going to remember, one time when I was 8, I did something that looked totally impossible, and I could see that strength building in him. And so it's from his perspective, it definitely a different kid coming off that mountain. And then for my wife's, she came out to the valley every day with a radio, we call them Rocky Talkies. And she would call up to Sam and talk to us. And it was beautiful, the conversations they would have. And Sam would always look forward to talking to Mom when she would come. And she was a big encourager in it. And that's so important when I think about the story in general. Like, it would be impossible without a wife that was like on board, encouraging us, encouraging Sam, and seeing the tremendous value and reward of doing something like this.
Yeah, I can't imagine that. For individuals to do what you did, specifically each individual to participate, and then obviously your perspective as a dad to have to do most of the heavy lifting and the coaching and your own mental state up there, and then to have your wife be that super support person that comes out, dials it in, talks to you guys, supports you. I imagine And you can tell me, did she have to work through some of her own fears or some of her own mental states, even to get to the place where she comes out to support? I mean, tell me about her mindset going up
Yeah.
from 2 years up to the day.
Yeah, I don't want to say that like we didn't ever question it or wonder or
Yeah.
worry. It was a 2-year process, and right up to it too, we talked about like we don't know, we could pull the plug on this, and Sam knew that he could pull the plug on it, right? Like
Hmm.
that you got to make this decision. When you tie in Sam, we're going up, man. Like this
Yeah.
is like we're committed. And we spent a lot of time even visualizing the wall, me and Sam, where at night I would create scenarios. Like, because we mapped out the wall. It'd be like, okay, we're on pitch 15 and you just skinned your knee and it's starting to rain. What are we going to do?
Yeah.
And he would give me back feedback of what we would do. He says, well, I need to get a Band-Aid and I better get my
Yeah.
rain jacket on, and we've got to hurry to get to camp because it's just a couple pitches away. And it's
Mm.
like, because of that visualizing, he was able to
Yeah.
really kind of in his mind understand
Yeah.
where safety was, where some refuge was, versus
Right.
our instinct, which is just to say, get me down, get me off
Run.
of this wall.
Yeah.
And so it was a lot of like conversations and development and preparation. We had to think through so many situations, and we had to put Sam in those situations on
Mm.
other walls to get him ready.
Tell me about during those 5 days, did you see a marked difference in Sam from
Absolutely.
ground to summit? I mean, tell me about that.
I mean, like I was saying, on the hike down, it like off of El Capitan, like it was just so cool to see this kid that had felt like he had done something extraordinary and he knew it. And like to then celebrate him too was really fun. Like when he came, as he came down the trail, everybody on the trail knew who he was because everyone in Yosemite was watching the news.
I can't imagine.
And he comes down and we go to the little lodge there and they give him like a free burger and they put his picture
Yeah.
up on the TV screens. And it was so
Unbelievable.
cool. Like the way that other people responded to him and that
Yeah.
he knew he had something.
That's amazing.
So,
That's cool. Well, you had a quote, so I picked it up somewhere and I read it last time. It says, part of being a human is having fear, and fear exists for one reason. It's to keep us alive. I was like, here. It's there to tell you you're in danger. It's like a warning light, turn you away from something that might kill you. And so it's certainly a good thing. And then you go on to say, but the problem is that to find real life, one must take risk. And so I kind of have a two-part question to that. I agree that we have to take risks to find life. But my second part of that question, and you can ponder on both of them, is in life, the first time you get in a car, you're scared to death. You take your driver's test. You're really, you're uber aware of everything around you. And, you're taking that big risk. You're taking your life into your own hands. And then after time, you get comfortable and you know how to do it and it comes natural and all those things. At what point does taking that ultra risk on the side of a mountain like that, does it become more comfortable? Does it become more risky? Does it become less risky based upon those kind of the balance of I'm comfortable when I know I'm taking a big risk?
Yeah. So the first thing to understand is that I actually don't feel like I took this huge risk in what we did.
Sure.
We really managed the risk. I mean, we basically
enough, yeah.
we take a risk when we get it, anytime we trap our kid in and put him in our car. I mean, that's a
Sure.
real risk. That's probably the number one way that your kid's most likely to die is putting them in any vehicle. That's how people die. But we compare that risk against the rewards of it. I mean, are we just going to walk everywhere? And so we begin and we find ways to make it safer,
Mm.
And so like, as I approach El Capitan, it wasn't like, man, this is like on the edge of life or death, like I was mitigating the risk very carefully. And so, but what's important is that where does that inner courage come from? And so we see it like this, is that like, as Sam spends more and more wall time, he gained clarity, and that clarity gives him confidence. And then it's that confidence that gives him that courage. And there's this video of him dancing on a portal edge up there. And then he plops down and it got 25 million views because all of these people are so upset that he is like jumping around in this portal edge. But he's comfortable, not because he's stupid. He's comfortable because he knows he's safe. He knows
Yeah.
he's locked into anchors. In fact, he's safer there than the person standing on the bottom of the wall, because the most dangerous thing that can happen on the wall is rocks falling on you, which is more likely on the bottom of the wall than, 2/3 of the way up the wall. And
well, that's where I got that question. I mean, when I saw him dance around on the portaledge, I'm like, he is locked in. He understands where he's at. He feels comfortable. He's smiling. He's not crying. I mean, that gave me some sense of confidence. Maybe I'm just a big chicken, but I'm like, that's amazing. I found that one little clip to be, wow, just incredible. So that's where the question came from. So kind of reverse course a little bit. You guys did El Cap, and you've done other big walls, and I'm sure you have other ones in the future. At what point did you and your wife, if you go back to when you were early on parents, at what point in your life did you say, I think this is going to be a way that we can really invest in our kids and invest and be, like you said, intentional with our parenting? Was that something that was pretty natural for you to come up with, or was that a process for you and your wife?
It was very natural for me. I lose sleep over it. I feel like my time is so short with my kids, and it's, a lot of people will tell you that, but it's easy to lose it and to miss it. And
sure.
And for me, it's I'm raising boys. I am building boys. I'm trying to figure out what is it, the things they need, and then how do I get them those things? And it's not like the internet where you just Google it and you get it. You can't just say, hey, son, I'm going to teach you about courage today. The universe isn't architected in that way. Instead, we have to create an environment and then help them to discover it. If they discover it, they own it so much more than if we're just kind of constantly just saying it to them. They have to actually live it and experience it. And there's so many other ways I could share in my parenting where we're doing that, and we're trying to get our boys these things. So we kind of begin to put together the list of things. What are the things that are important for us, for our kids when they graduate from our home? And in most families, they haven't thought about it at all. It's or they haven't thought about it deeply, and they want their kids to graduate from high school, probably graduate from college, and basically have basic integrity. But what is the process to get those things, and what are the things we want? And I spent a lot of time thinking about that.
How did you get to a point where you actually thought about that? I mean, how do you go from 15-year-old boy to say, when I'm a dad, here's how I'm going to approach it? I mean, was there mentors in your life? Were there turning points or mindset changes that caused you to feel this way or think this way? Or how did you come up with the idea of building men and creating environments and all the good parenting advice you're giving? Because I think it's great.
Yeah, I think it's, I try to put together the journey that, I would have longed for, that other men have spoken into me. We're really kind of a product of other men as men. It's the other men that have come around us that give us our strength. I mean, Dave Ramsey talks so much about take the 5 closest men in your life, average their wealth. That's how much money you make. That's actually true. But it's also take the 5 people in your life, average the story that they're living, and you're going to be the average of that story. It's so we're affected so much by others, and there's no one that has greater impact on us than our parents when they're intentional. And I could give a lot of examples of that. For instance, one of the things I want for my boys is I want them all to be able to sell. I know it's kind of a unique thing in my list of things that I want for my boys, but sales is not, I'm not good at sales, or I am good at sales. Sales is an acquired skill that everyone can learn, and everyone must learn in their life, in my opinion. And so one thing we do with our neighbors is, have you ever heard the game Bigger Better?
Sure.
Terry? So that's what we do, Bigger Better. And my kids love Bigger Better. We start with a toy car, and we'll go to the neighbors and we'll try to trade it and they try to trade it for something bigger or better. And, and then they'll get a bigger toy, and then they trade it all the way up. And just the other day, we ended up with we ended the day with a bowling lane that I had to figure out I had to put on. It's this, it's probably $1,000 thing that someone wanted to trade for whatever we had, and we put it in the back bed of my car and took it to one of my Airbnbs, and then I gave my kids some money for it. But we always trade up we start with something that's worth $1, and we trade up to something that's worth hundreds of dollars. And the kids doing that learn some valuable skills, And so in so many ways, like I put together a list. Here are the things that I want for my kids by the time they're ready to graduate from home. And I want to begin to work on those things in their life.
Yeah, that's incredible. You said earlier you're going to write a book, I think, and I hope you have some of those life skills and some of those what's on your list in there, so other people can read that. Now you have three boys, and I understand that at some point you were slated to have a fourth child in your life, and I'd love for you to tell us about that. Not just because it's generally a sad story, but it's certainly something that I think is inspiring for me and could be for others. But tell me about your daughter and that period of your time.
So after having three boys, all you want in the world is a girl, especially when you're an intentional parent. Like it just seems so exotic and different and new. It's like a whole different thing. We got a boy house. It's a lot of noise. Nobody wears pants. Like, everybody comes to the house covered in mud. It's kind of like, what would a girl be like? That could be a really exciting thing for us. And so we prayed for her, we hoped for her, and then we found out she was coming, which for our family was a big deal. We're visionary people. I'm already seeing like, what's this wedding going to be like in the future? She hasn't been born yet, and so for us, that's about as exciting. That was the most exciting thing for us. And so we go into this sonogram appointment for our daughter. And at first we thought our sonographer was telling us that our daughter was going to be disabled. And we probably thought that because we just couldn't hear what she was actually saying. But as I began to ask questions, she says, "No, Joe, you don't understand. What I'm telling you is that your wife's going to develop this baby full 9 months to term. And then after your baby's born, she's going to die." And I was kind of like, no, that's not going to happen. There's no way that's going to happen. And then she began to basically advocate to abort our baby. And instantly I was like, whoa, like we're in the wrong place here, honey. This is like,
right.
We came, the whole reason you're here is because you're here to save the baby. Like giving birth is a natural thing. Like the reason we have a doctor involved is to save the baby. So we went to another doctor, and they pretty much heard the same thing. And we did a bunch of research, and we found out that there was no chance that our baby was going to live. And
what was your daughter's name?
Her daughter, we named her Ember.
Ember, that's right.
Yeah, because we thought of her as like, we spent a lot of time at campfires, and I saw her as like this coal that like would break away from the fire and then like burn out. And so when we really came down to it, that there was no way out of this, Ann fell into a pretty dark depression. She basically moved into the basement guest room of our house and like closed the door. And I remember those days when I'd be working, and I'd be like, if my wife's just in the back room and the three boys are upstairs, this house is going to be on fire. And so my clients started being very gracious with me, and I realized they were going to give me the time off. Right. And so I suggested to Ann in a conversation, I said, what if we just took Ember to all of our favorite places before she's born? And so we literally took our daughter up a whole series of mountains, and also to all of our favorite places, and had spent many summers in Yosemite. So she wanted to swim under Yosemite like falls with Ember, and we just went to all these cool places, and I began calling her our little bucket list baby. And it was this most beautiful year. Whereas at the beginning of the journey, when Ann was super depressed, I literally prayed. I said, God, is there any way that you could just miscarry this baby so that we could just get this over with? Because this is too much for me to bear. Yeah. And by the end of that tour, I was praying, God, is there any way that November could just like not come or be postponed a little bit? Because it was Ember till November, we began to say.
Wow.
And when my boys got back from that tour, they were so sad to learn that Ember wasn't going to make it to Christmas, because Christmas is always a big deal at our house. Yeah. And so we ended up having Christmas in October. So it goes in our house, goes Christmas and then Halloween. And so we lit up the house, and got the kids involved and did presents and put up the tree, and, with my pregnant wife, and which is now a tradition in our home. And really, like, the boys bonded with their sister. And when she came on November 4th, it was by far the most spiritual and transcendent event of my life. For me, what was wild is we experienced God in a way that I had never known God to even be.
Mm.
And that's the thing that was so life changing to our family. It
Mhm.
was like heaven kind of descended onto our delivery room, and she lived for an hour and 6 minutes. But for us, it was like God, for the first time in my life, was sad with us. And I have to say, like, it's so important. It was so important that I understood that and really felt that for who I am today. And it was so life changing for us that literally, like, we began this journey that led us to literally change our last name to Evermore, from Baker to Evermore, just like Saul became Paul in the Bible.
Yeah, I thought that was an amazing part of your story, and what just a beautiful way to celebrate the life of your daughter, and to bring a family together under those terms, and to just really make a mark in the family in every way, tradition wise, changing your name, the whole thing. So, for those of you that maybe not have caught it, Joe Baker's name, they changed their last name to Evermore, and I just thought I thought that was wonderful. And I've chased Joe for the last couple months, and we've had a couple misses, and we've tried to get on this, and we finally got on it today. But I did notice last week, I don't know if you want to talk about that. There's some other news in your life. And
Yeah.
I was just like, I sat there and got tears in my eyes. I just couldn't believe it. So tell us
It's
the
big
news.
news for us because after losing Ember, it took a lot for Ann to just be ready to take that risk again and be willing to have a baby again. And we're pregnant again, and the boys are ecstatic.
Congratulations.
They are so excited. The boys have been asking, "Hey, is there a way can we get a baby? Can we get what do we have to do to get another baby?" And so telling them, we put it up online of like us telling
Yeah.
them. It was beautiful the way the boys responded. And they keep asking about the baby.
Yeah, I
And
bet.
so
Yeah, that was cute. I watched that and I thought, oh my goodness, I could hear the little guy in the back going, oh, how did you get one in there? I mean, yeah, what's that all about? And I just thought, what another amazing moment. I just think God chooses to do things in ways sometimes that we can't even imagine. And I'm just, it was such a wonderful addition to the part of your life that didn't go great.
This episode of Grind to Growth to Greatness is brought to you by Terry Barr, Distinctive Real Estate, advising families across Pennsylvania and Northern Virginia for over 15 years. Visit the website at terrybarrealestate.com.
So you do a lot of mountain climbing. Almost every weekend, you and your family are out doing something, or one of the boys, or multiple boys, or whatever. That must be something that comes at a cost. But what do you do for a living? I know you got a company called Superhero Sidekicks. Tell me about that a little bit. Tell us what the Evermore family's into when it comes to business.
Yeah. So I'm really good at helping organizations significantly grow. And so when I come in, I start focusing in on their story, and then I develop their brand, and then I develop their products. That's what their kind of donors invest in. And then I work on their pitch, and then I work on how do they get that pitch on stages. And once we get all of those things in alignment, it's amazing how fast an organization can grow. And so originally, when I started the organization, I thought what people needed was strategy. So I would come and they'd pay me a bunch of money to spend a couple of days them putting together a brilliant strategy of like, here's how you're going to get to 3x or 10x your organization.
Right. Yeah.
And then I'd call them up in like 9 months, be like, hey, how's it going? And they'd be like, it's going fine. But we took the strategy and basically put it on the shelf.
Oh,
and
boy.
And for me, I was like heartbroken.
Yeah.
And like kind of mad at them, And they're like, hey, we paid you good, didn't we? And I said, yeah, but like for me, it wasn't about the strategy. It was about the results of the strategy.
Yeah.
And so we literally named the company Superhero Sidekick because what I said is it's not about the strategy. We help you put together the plan to 2x or 10x, but then we walk with you every week, developing you, keeping you on track. And when we do that, we see significant growth. We have one client that started with us a little over 2 years ago. They were at $5,000 a month of reoccurring revenue. And today they're at $275,000 a month of reoccurring revenue. And in 18 months to 2 years from now, we're going to really draw it to $1 million a month reoccurring revenue. Wow. And that reoccurring revenue is what turns into like manna from heaven for an organization that's able to, have such an impact, a positive impact on the world. And so I believe in nonprofits, and I'm really good at
so these are all nonprofits. Do you have for-profit as well that you help, or is it normally?
I've worked with some sales teams with for-profits, worked on a lot of branding projects for for-profits. But my sweet spot where I'm really good is getting that not-for-profit that's usually around like 200, 250,000 to, in the millions. That's what we're good at.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's a neat story. Even your website's kind of cool. I love the name Superhero Sidekick. I don't know, obviously, if that goes along with all the things you're doing with your boys, but it seemed like it fit like a glove, the name anyway. So I thought that was great. So tell me, before we wrap it up, what's next for the Baker family? More of the same, I'm assuming, but do we have any big things in store for the Evermore family?
It's the Evermore family. Yeah, we got some big things coming. We're going to the Wind Rivers in a few weeks. Remember that first story I told you about where I fell in love with my wife? Part of our journey of the big goals we've always set also correspond with telling our sons our story. And so my youngest, like I said, is climbing that mountain, Pingor. That was the first mountain that I ever climbed with Ann. And then my middle child, Sylvan Lightyear, is going to climb Wolf's Head. That was the mountain that me and Ann got stranded on and spent the night shivering on and telling stories on. And he's 7. And so it's going to be a huge deal for him to do that.
Yeah, it's amazing.
So we're daily training him. Just last weekend, I took him up the largest sport climb in Colorado, getting him ready. And so this route had like 20 pitches. And so it was a big, big sport climb. We're getting ready for a big backpack trip. That's our next big adventure.
That's fantastic. So one of the questions I've started to ask my guests, if you had 5 minutes with every parent out there, what advice would you give parents that are either new parents or they got toddlers or even parents that have, teens or older? What kind of advice would Joe Evermore give?
Wow. I feel like I need to spend some time processing that because there's so many things. But I want to see more parents be intentional, more thoughtful about their kids. It's like, for me, I'm trying to discover the superpower of each kid and then develop that superpower into something, And so I'm always trying to just figure out what that is and then harness it and really kind of develop it. Like, let's untap that potential. And I don't want my kids just dropped into a mold. And I'm trying really hard to not do that. I'm trying really hard to get focused on them. The other thing we're also really careful about is it's really easy to just say yes to everything. Oh, you want to sign up for that camp? You want to do that? You want to do this thing? You want to do that after school? And then eventually with a bunch of kids, it's like you're just end up driving everybody around and you're really not a part of their development and story. Other people are, all these other coaches and people are instead of you. And so for us, it's really important to us that we're developing our kids in a way where we can keep working on them and developing them. So setting really big goals with your kids, it impacts your kids, but it also really impacts you. Climbing El Capitan was 5 amazing days with one of my kids, A lot of parents don't even get that. But what's even better than that is all of the time it took getting Sam ready. Years of all of these other times developing him to get him ready. And when you set big goals, it's it drives you to get there. It drives you to spend the time that you need. It makes your time very purposeful and intentional. Yeah. So I want more intentional parents.
I think that's great advice. I know that I was guilty of what you talked about saying yes to a lot of things, making sure that my boys, were able to do the things that they thought they wanted to do. And, of course, we talked about finishing. You've got to finish what you start, and you've got to you got to get to work. If you're going to start, you got to work at it. You got to become the best you can be, all those things. But I just had a conversation with my colleagues yesterday. She was talking to me about all the things her daughters have and all she's doing and how wore out she is and all of those things. And it just reminded me that after hearing what you said, that it's hard for parents to be intentional lots of times. it's hard when you work all day and you come home and you're like, hey, what's the plan? I think you have to have a plan for your family and a plan for your children. And that's what I'm hearing you say. You're intentional about planning. You're intentional about what you want to build in your kids. And I just think that's I think you should write that book, honestly, about parenting in that regard. I think it's a winner. But one last question. Are you reading any books? Do you read books? Do you do podcasts? Do you do any kind of betterment or that kind of thing for yourself? Are you doing favorite author or anything like that?
Oh yeah, I got a few really good books this year that I love. One of my favorite books that everyone should read this year is called The Comfort Crisis. And it talks about how like things have gotten like so comfortable, so safe that now we have all of these other issues because of it. And it's just
true.
a very, very impactful book. Read a lot of business books. I'm a big fan of like Traction and basically the EOS, all the EOS books. Big fan of those. And then I think the best book in the world for men is Wild at Heart.
Yeah, I've read that. That's an old one, but that's a great one.
Everyone needs to read that again, again and again.
Yeah, it's a great one. I read it with both my boys, for sure.
Awesome.
For sure, yeah.
My boys aren't young enough yet. And the reason I haven't written the book yet on raising young men or young boys is because I feel like I'm still in the middle of it. I'm still in the learning stage of it. And I'm trying to take lots of notes. But, it's interesting. There's so few books on the subject. Like, there's not that many good books on raising men.
Yeah, I think that's unfortunate. I think you said a lot there. I think we've gone into a society of comfort, in our need to advance society and advance technology and we've kind of advanced right out of the hard stuff. Our hard stuff is how do we code this software? How do we make our app that makes our life easier here or there? And, and I use them as well, but I think you're right. We've kind of coded ourselves out of the hard stuff. Well, I certainly appreciate, when I give all my guests a sweatshirt, I told you that, and he goes, oh, do you have size small for kids? So I went out and I had some small ones.
All right.
Just for your kids.
Oh.
So I'm gonna go ahead and send you those to you and your kids. And I just got those in yesterday, so I was apropos that we were delayed. But I want to thank you for coming on here. It's been a delight, of course. I love your story. I think it's a story that will last and a story that people can go back to and get more from. And hopefully, if you can stay focused and stay motivated, it'll be a story that could lead to so many great things for your kids. And wish you the very best. Can't wait to see. Hopefully, you have that daughter, and if not, you'll have another mountain climber maybe. But we'll be watching. Pretty excited to see what happens. So, thanks for coming on. Thanks for being patient. You were a trooper getting on here for the second time. So, thank you for that and coming on our show.
All right. Thanks so much, man.
I appreciate you. All right. Well, thanks for tuning in to Grind to Growth to Greatness. Our guest, Joe Evermore, was here telling us stories of his kids, his wife, his journey, his mountain climbing experiences. I hope you enjoyed it. Tune in next week for another episode of Grind to Growth to Greatness. We hope to see you then. Welcome to season 2.
You've been listening to the Grind to Growth to Greatness podcast. Our passion is to talk to the brightest entrepreneurs, CEOs, creators, athletes, anyone who's made it, and dive into their struggles, their successes, and their secrets. We hope you've enjoyed the show. If you did, make sure to like, rate, and review. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, you can find us on Facebook and Instagram at Grind to Growth to Greatness. See you next time.